Welcome. In this video, we will continue our introduction to Excel VBA. In part 1, we discuss the different things you can accomplish with using Excel VBA. You can automate repetitive tasks. You can use VBA to create or change different functions of a workbook. You can use Excel VBA to enter codes or formulas into Excel VBA. We discuss different components of the VBA editor screen. We discuss there are two ways to create a VBA code. One, you can use the record macro feature to record a macro, or you can manually enter your code into the VBA code screen. In part 2, we will expand on what we discussed in part 1. In part 1, we discussed the different components of the VBA screen. This, of course, is our code screen. This section here is our Project Explorer screen. So the Explorer screen will tell you how many workbooks you have open. In this case, we have just one. If you expand, you'll actually see the different sheets we have within the workbook you selected. And also within the workbook, we have what we call modules. So a module is essentially where you would have your VBA code or your VBA scripts. Now, in each module, you can have one code, or you can have a single code, or you can have multiple codes within the same module. Now, if you prefer to keep your code separate and have them on separate modules, what you can do is right-click on modules and insert a new module. Now, in part 1, we discussed there are two ways to write a VBA code. You can use the record a macro feature. With that feature, if you use that feature, Excel or Excel VBA will automatically create a new module for you with the code. And here we just inserted a new module. There we have it. There we have our new module. So as I stated, if we were to use the record macro feature, it creates a new module. So right now we have 3 active modules. So if I were to record a new macro, and then I will stop recording. Now if I go back to VBA, I now have 4 modules. So the macro that I just recorded would be in macro 4, and here are all the steps for that macro. You can also maximize and minimize your code window. So you can minimize and maximize. And as a shortcut, you can switch between windows. You can go from modules 1, 2, 3, and 4 by using the Control Tab shortcut. In part 1, we discuss some of the components of a VBA code. We have our sub feature, which is defining the sub. We have the function procedures, so we are telling the code what to do. Now we also have what we call declarations. Simply put, a declaration is a statement. So a declaration is simply saying this means this. As an example, let's see how we use declarations. We will insert a new module and we are going to create a brand new sub function. We are going to create a brand new VBA code. So in this example, we will identify the name of our workbook, which is simple macro. So we will say the workbook name equals the active workbook dot name. So that is a declaration. So what we are saying is the name of the active workbook we are defining as WNAME, W name, or vice versa. So we're saying W name is the name of our workbook. Now let's take this one step further. So if you are a seasoned user of Excel VBA, you will get to the point where you can write your own code versus using the record macro feature. And with that, it becomes tedious to keep writing the same thing over and over. So what we use is a declaration. So we are going to write a simple formula. It's A7 now. Let's run our code and see what happens. See, we have simple macro. So if you were writing your code where you have to reference the name of the workbook multiple times, this is a shortcut to do that using a declaration. While we have our VBA code screen open, let's look at some of the options we have. If we go to Tools, Options, this box here, Require Variable Declaration. If you have this box checked, what this box is essentially saying is if you have a declaration, you have to explicitly define that declaration. Essentially, you have to define that as a string. You can define that as an integer and so forth. Now, in this case, we will define that as a string. Now, if you check this box, this option does not apply to any existing modules that you have. It only applies to feature models. So any existing codes that you have in those existing modules will not be affected. Now let's look at an example of how that works. So we have now checked our box and hit OK. We will create a new module. And if you notice at the very top of the screen, it says option explicit. This will not show if that box is not checked. Now, the same code that we just wrote and ran, and we see that it works, we will copy and paste, and we will run that same code and see what happens. And we have an error that says variable not defined. Now, as I mentioned, you have to define your variable. Now let's define it. So as I stated, in this case, the declaration would be defined as a string. And that one simple change that we made will make the macro run. So now, before we run again, we will reset. And for the sake of it, we will delete that. And now run the macro. And now it works. So to summarize, if this box is checked, any declaration that you have will have to be defined. Another option that we have is the auto list members. This option, what this option does, it will provide you suggestions. So as you are typing your codes, it will provide you suggestions as VBA anticipates what you are trying to accomplish. As an example, if I were to start typing, it will give me suggestions. This is what I was trying to accomplish. I want the workbook name. So again, it's just an added feature, a helpful feature if you are unsure of what you're trying to accomplish. Also on the options screen is the editor. So what the editor does is you can format your code screen. This here. You can change the font size, you can change the font itself, and so forth. So if I wanted to make this a bit larger, I can change that. And now the text is larger. If I wanted to change the actual font, the font is changed. Those are some of the options that you have with the VBA screen. On the general screen, you can also change the width, the height of the editor screen itself, and other general changes you can make. On the general screen, you can make general changes. You can adjust the width, the height of the VBA screen, and just some more general housekeeping changes you can make as well. Thank you for watching. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. We appreciate your support. Link to our Cash App is below.